At my brother's wedding, he called me out. My brother is broke and living in my garage. Yes, snickered. My dad shouted, he's a disgrace. Then the bride grabbed the mic, and the room went silent. Now, let's begin this one. The fluorescent light flickered above Lester Royce as he hunched over his laptop in the converted garage that had become both his bedroom and office over the past 4 months. The space smelled of motor oil and unspoken resentment. 3 years ago, he'd been living in a high-rise apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. Now, at 34, he was sleeping on a fold-out couch in his younger brother's garage. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. You decent in there? Drew Royce didn't wait for an answer before swinging the door open, his 6 feet 3 inches frame filling the entrance. Just checking you're still coming tomorrow. Lester forced a smile. Wouldn't miss my baby brother's wedding. Drew nodded, his eyes drifting around the garage with poorly disguised contempt. Good. Mom was worried you might bail. Their mother wasn't worried. Drew just wanted another opportunity to remind Lester of his fall from grace. I'll be there, Lester said, returning to his screen. Front row, just like we discussed. Drew lingered. Penny confirmed. She's coming too. The mention of Penny Holloway, Lester's ex-fiancée, sent a cold spike through his chest. Great, he muttered. Of course, Drew had invited her. And of course, she had accepted. She's bringing her husband, Drew added with calculated casualness. Ted's a neurosurgeon now. He bought that new place in Beacon Hill. Lester's jaw tightened. Ted Palmer, his former business partner, the man who had stolen both his company and his fiancée in the span of 6 months. I'm kind of busy here, Drew. Right. Drew's smile was thin. Working on your big comeback plan. He didn't bother hiding the mockery in his voice. Dad's not coming, by the way. Not since, well, you know. Lester knew their father hadn't spoken to him since the bankruptcy hearing. Vincent Royce didn't tolerate failure in any form, especially not in his eldest son, the one who had once been the golden child. After Drew left, Lester stared at his laptop screen at the business plan that represented his only shot at redemption. His new alternative energy startup had attracted interest from several venture capitalists. But after the spectacular collapse of his previous company, few were willing to take a chance on the disgraced wonderkind of Boston tech, as the business journals had called him. His phone buzzed with a text from Monroe, Washington, his only remaining friend from the old days. Heard the prodigals attending the royal wedding tomorrow. Need backup? Lester smiled despite himself. I'll be fine. It's just family. Family. The word had meant something different before everything fell apart. Before Drew had swooped in to rescue him by offering the garage as temporary housing, an arrangement Drew made sure to mention at every family gathering, business dinner, and social event they both attended. Before sleep claimed him that night, Lester's thoughts drifted to a conversation he'd had with Audrey Winters, Drew's fiancée, 3 weeks earlier. They'd run into each other at a coffee shop downtown, and something in her eyes had caught him off guard. Not pity, which he'd grown accustomed to, but something closer to respect. Drew doesn't know I'm meeting with you, she'd said, sliding into the seat across from him. He wouldn't understand. Understand what? Why? I want to talk to the real genius in the family. She'd smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed her face. I've read all your patents. What happened to you is criminal. You've been so surprised, he nearly spilled his coffee. No one had called him a genius since the lawsuit. No one had suggested that what happened wasn't entirely his fault. Drew says, she interrupted. Drew repeats what your father tells him. Neither of them understands what you were trying to build. The memory of that conversation sustained Lester as he drifted off to sleep in his brother's garage the night before the wedding that would change everything. The Winters-Royce wedding was every bit the society event Lester had expected. The historic Fairmont Copley Plaza ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and Boston's elite in their finest attire. Lester adjusted his rented tuxedo as he entered, acutely aware of the whispers that followed him. That's him, the older brother. I heard he lost everything. Living in a garage, can you imagine? He spotted his mother across the room, elegant in midnight blue, carefully avoiding his gaze. Nearby stood Penny with her new husband, both radiant in their success. Ted caught his eye and had the audacity to raise his champagne in a mock toast. You clean up well for a garage dweller, came a familiar voice. Monroe appeared at his side, handing him a tumbler of whiskey. Though I'm guessing this isn't how you imagined attending your brother's wedding. Not quite, Lester admitted, taking a long sip. Have you seen the happy couple yet? Just the groom. Drew was holding court near the head table, surrounded by groomsmen who all looked like they'd walked out of the same prep school catalog. I haven't congratulated the bride. Monroe's expression shifted. You might want to. Word is, she's been asking about you. Before Lester could respond, a strange ripple moved through the crowd. He turned to see the source of the disturbance, their father, Vincent Royce, striding through the entrance. I thought he wasn't coming, Lester muttered. Apparently, he changed his mind. Monroe's tone was grim. This should be interesting. The ceremony proceeded with rehearsed perfection. Lester sat in the front row beside his mother, who acknowledged him with only the briefest of nods. Across the aisle, Vincent sat stone-faced, his attention fixed on Drew. Audrey was stunning as she walked down the aisle, her gaze sweeping across the gathered guests until it landed briefly but unmistakably on Lester. Something passed between them in that moment, a shared secret, perhaps, or a warning. At the reception, Lester did his best to blend into the background, but it was during Drew's toast that everything began to unravel. I want to thank everyone for being here today, Drew began. Champagne flew in hand. His eyes, slightly glazed from alcohol, found Lester in the crowd. Family is everything to me, which is why I've always tried to take care of my own, even when some of them can't take care of themselves. A titter of uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room. Most of you know my brother, Lester, Drew continued, gesturing grandly in his direction. Former tech darling, current what would you call it, Lay? Sabbatical. Lester kept his expression neutral even as his grip tightened on his glass. My brother is broke and living in my garage, Drew announced to the room, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. But hey, that's what family does, right? We pick up the pieces when someone crashes and burns. Yes, snickered. Lester saw his mother close her eyes briefly, pained but unwilling to intervene. At least he showed up today, Drew added with a cruel smile, though God knows what he could afford to wear. That's enough. Vincent Royce stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. All eyes turned to him, anticipating a father's defense of his son. Instead, Vincent pointed directly at Lester. He's a disgrace, a complete embarrassment to this family. Couldn't even keep his company afloat. And now he's dragging down his brother's big day with his failure. The room went deadly silent. Lester felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, the collective judgment of Boston society crushing down on his shoulders. Then movement at the head table. You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 2. Audrey rose, her white gown shimmering under the ballroom lights, stepped with deliberate calm to Drew's side and took the microphone from his hand. The room went entirely silent. I'd like to make a toast of my own, she said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the air. To truth, to integrity, and to justice, which sometimes arrives late but always arrives. She turned to face Lester directly. I've been asked to keep quiet about certain things, about documents I discovered in my fiancé's, my husband's, home office, about conversations I overheard between Drew and Ted Palmer regarding the takeover of Lester Royce. Her gaze shifted to Ted, who had gone deathly pale. About evidence of corporate espionage and sabotage that I've spent the last 3 months documenting and verifying. Drew lunged for the microphone. Audrey, you're drunk. This isn't. She sidestepped him with surprising agility. I'm not drunk, Drew. I'm finally seeing clearly, and so is the Securities and Exchange Commission, who received my full report this morning. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom. Vincent Royce's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. I married you today, Audrey continued, her eyes locked on Drew's shocked face, because my lawyer advised that as your wife, I couldn't be compelled to testify against you. But as the new majority shareholder of Palmer Royce Technologies, thanks to the prenuptial agreement you were too arrogant to read carefully, I can and will ensure that justice is served. She turned back to the stunned crowd. Please enjoy the rest of the reception. The open bar will remain open, though I suspect some of you might want to call your attorneys instead. With that, she placed the microphone gently on the table and walked, head high, shoulders back, directly to Lester. I believe, she said, extending her hand to him, we have some business to discuss, Mr. Royce. The Boston Globe headline read, Tech Scandal Rocks Beacon Hill, Palmer Royce execs charged with fraud, espionage. Lester folded the newspaper and set it aside, gazing out the window of his new office overlooking the harbor. 6 months had passed since Drew's wedding, 6 months of depositions, legal proceedings, and the methodical dismantling of the conspiracy that had destroyed his first company. The evidence Audrey had gathered was damning. Email exchanges between Drew, Ted, and Vincent revealed a coordinated effort to sabotage Lester's business from within, steal his intellectual property, and frame him for financial mismanagement. The scheme had been Vincent's idea, a way to teach Lester humility while ensuring the family's technological innovations remained under control. Drew and Ted had been eager accomplices, motivated by jealousy and greed. The door opened, and Monroe entered with 2 cups of coffee. The team's ready when you are. We've got 12 minutes before the investor call. Lester nodded, accepting the coffee. How's Audrey holding up? Better than anyone expected. The divorce proceedings are almost finalized, and the board unanimously approved her as interim CEO, Monroe grinned. She's terrifying them into record productivity. The unlikely alliance between Lester and his former sister-in-law had shocked Boston society, but it made perfect business sense. Audrey's financial acumen, combined with Lester's technological vision, had already attracted significant new investment. More importantly, the patents that had been stolen from him were being returned one by one. And Drew, Lester asked, the name still bitter on his tongue. Still making bail arrangements. His attorneys are pushing for a plea deal, but the SEC isn't in a generous mood. Ted's already flipped, offering testimony against both Drew and your father. Vincent had suffered perhaps the greatest fall. Disgraced, disowned by his social circle, and facing serious criminal charges, he'd retreated to his New Hampshire estate, where reports suggested he was drinking heavily and refusing all visitors. Have you heard from your mother? Monroe asked carefully. Lester sighed. Eleanor Royce had been caught in the middle of the family's implosion. Initially, she defended Vincent and Drew, unable to believe they were capable of such deliberate cruelty. But as the evidence mounted, her denials gave way to profound grief. She called yesterday. Lester said, she's selling the house and moving to Arizona. Says she needs a fresh start away from the Royce name. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Royce. Miss Winters is here. Audrey entered impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, tablet in hand. The prototype testing exceeded expectations, she said without preamble. We're looking at a 42% improvement over projected efficiency rates. Lester smiled. The clean energy storage technology that had been at the heart of his original company, the innovation that Vincent, Drew, and Ted had tried to steal, was finally nearing market-ready status. I saw Penny yesterday, Audrey added, her tone casual but her eyes watchful. At the courthouse, she looked diminished. Lester felt nothing at the mention of his ex-fiancée. Whatever anger or hurt he'd harbored had been eclipsed by the magnitude of what had followed. Ted's actions have consequences for those around him, he said simply. Speaking of consequences, Monroe interjected, there's a rumor that Drew's been trying to contact you. Lester nodded. He called from a blocked number last night. I didn't answer. What do you think he wants? Audrey asked. Forgiveness, probably, or money for his legal defense. Lester shrugged. Either way, he's wasting his time. The man who had spent 4 months living in his brother's garage, enduring daily reminders of his supposed failure, had disappeared. In his place stood someone harder, sharper, a man who had learned that family ties could be both chains and weapons. It's almost time, Monroe reminded them, gesturing toward the conference room where the investor call would take place. As they walked together, Audrey touched Lester's arm lightly. You know, I never actually thanked you for. For what? You're the one who saved me. She shook her head. You gave me courage. Watching you rebuild from nothing, refusing to stay down despite everything they did to you, it showed me what real strength looks like. Lester considered this as they entered the conference room, where a team of engineers and executives waited expectantly. 3 years ago, he'd had everything: success, respect, love, only to lose it all through betrayal. He'd hit bottom in that garage, surrounded by the ghosts of his former life. Now, as he prepared to present the technology that would revolutionize renewable energy storage, the vision that his father and brother had been too short-sighted to appreciate, Lester realized that his greatest achievement wasn't the patents, the prototype, or even the vindication. It was surviving the fall with his integrity intact. It was refusing to become what they had accused him of being. As the call connected and the faces of major international investors appeared on the screen, Lester stepped forward with quiet confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We're about to change the world. Behind him, the prototype hummed softly, a physical manifestation of resilience, innovation, and the power of rising from the ashes of betrayal. Not as a prodigal returned, but as a phoenix reborn.